Good morning, my friends. I am so grateful to be with you again. Let us begin, as always, by taking a few breaths together. So, first, breathe everything out, and together let us take a deep breath in. And let go. Another deep breath in. And let go. Together, we're going to take one more deep breath in. And we're going to let go. So, thanks for connecting with me with those simple breaths. I want to begin today by reminding us that our theme across CSL this month is Cosmic Connections, that we have been exploring the interconnectedness, the truth that there is some subtle presence. We call it God, we call it consciousness, that is really truly woven into everyone and everything and into life itself, and that we are inextricably, unexplainably, beautifully connected to each other, to God, to the planet, to the universe, and that is one of the core concepts that we hold true in science of mind, and that in this moment, in this experience that we are all sharing together, we must find a way to continuously bring our minds and our hearts and our perception back to this place of seeing that we believe that we are deeply connected to each other. No matter what it is that we see, no matter what it is that we're experiencing, beneath it all, there's only one of us here, and we are all connected to it and through it. Our weekly topic across CSL this week is Bridges Over Troubled Water. And I'm going to add to that an idea of we need to explore, which is loving the unlovable. And so first, let's talk about bridges over troubled water. We are living in tumultuous and turbulent times. That there is so much upheaval that the troubled water, if you will, the water is often a metaphor for consciousness. And that we are now currently, as a collective, as a society, as a nation, as a global family, we are moving through tumultuous consciousness. There are storms in mind, in reality, in community that we are seeing everywhere. And that we are so in the midst of this that the only way that we're ever going to perceive anything different is if we find a way to get out of the turmoil, out of the turbulence of all of this movement of consciousness that's taking place around us, that's manifesting as our politics, as corona, as our environment, as all of the things that are taking place in the world right now. We are seeing, as we've discussed many times, our own selves, our collective mind reflected back to us, and that should show us that there is some deep, deep sorting and calming and seeking of peace that we all must do. And it's in finding that connection, whether it's with our inner self, whether we find it with God, whether we're looking for it in other people or to the planet, we must be cultivating a sense of connection right now. Because all of the turbulence, all of the turmoil, all of this troubled water is about separation, is about not seeing ourselves as connected, is about each one of us buying into the sense of separation that is in a sense being regurgitated back to us all the time. One of my teachers is Jean Houston, and she's been saying for a long time now that the greatest work, the biggest challenge, the thing we must meet in the 2020s is to bridge the great divide of otherness. That the more we see each individual, the more that we see each political party, the more that we see our racial separation, the more that we see all of us as other and separate, that that separation is going to continue to wake in our perspective. And we need to be looking at how can we begin to bridge those connections? How can we begin to build the bridges of awareness that there is only one of us here? And that is going to take us first getting ourselves out of the troubled water. It's going to take us getting into our spiritual practice, into our prayer work, into our deep contemplation and looking for God in order to get our minds out of the muck and get up onto the shore so that we can see where is a higher place from which we can build these bridges, so that we can bring people together, so that we can bring our own selves together, really, even in our own minds, and build those bridges so that we can stand above the situation and see what is happening. But we can't do it from down inside of the experience. We must find ways to lift our minds out of circumstance and begin to look at the cause, begin to look for the connections, begin to look for the source of all things. And if we look so deeply that we're willing to find God, that we're willing to find the spirit of life that is literally living and breathing in each one of us, and begin to seek the other from that place, that's the bridge. But the other bridges that we need to be making are the connections between all of the disparate pieces. And again, we can't see it from down inside of the circumstance. But when we take ourselves out in some way to a broader perspective, we can start to look at what's happening. You know, I've said multiple times in our conversations that the entirety of the world that we see is a mirror. It is a reflection, not only of our individual, but of our collective consciousness. And there are many things that are manifesting out of that. And the thing that continuously amazes me, especially as we move through the chaos of 2020, that every one of the major things that are showing up in our world, to me, are all mirrors of one thing. If we look at the symptoms of global climate change, we've watched the lungs of the earth inflamed and burning up. There's smoke and asphyxiating us in many parts of the world. Much of the forests of Australia burned up last year, the Amazon before that, the west coast of the United States in the last couple months. That the burning of the trees and the smoke in the air, the difficulty to breathe, and then the floods happening with the hurricanes and the fevered climates that are changing the weather. Burning lungs and flooding and fever are all the symptoms of COVID. The difficulty to breathe is the main way that COVID affects our bodies. The entirety of much of our nation in the wake of George Floyd's death has been chanting the words, "I can't breathe." If we're willing to look for the connections, this idea of our shared breath, of our ability to breathe, the fact that we are suffocating ourselves in the midst of all these circumstances, that this one message is being chanted at us from all directions, and that inability to breathe, that desire, that need to breathe, is about our connection to life. If we look at our politics, if we look at the racial separation, if we look at the way that we treat the earth, if we look at the disparity between classes and genders, if we look at all of the breakdown and the separation in the world, all of this is symptomatic of a lack of an awareness of the fact that all of these things are connected, of the fact that systems of thought are connected to people's lives and people's experiences, and the way that we think in our collective systems of thought affect how we engage with the planet, and the give and take and the cause effect of what we are participating in creating all the time. That everything is connected, and that the one issue underneath all of these things that have been showing up in our world have to do with our lack of awareness to our connection to our fellow humankind, to our connection to the planet, to our connection to life itself. And that the call right now to all of humanity, that the earth is screaming to us, that we are screaming to ourselves, is wake up and look for the connection. Wake up and see that there's a great web of cause and effect taking place and that we're all participating in it. And what you do and what you think and what you experience and what you choose has great, great, great impact on other people, on the planet, on the future of life itself. That we must begin to see that the connections, we must begin to look for the connections. And one of the highest connections that we must be looking for is ourself in others. We must begin to look at every other human being as a reflection of ourselves, showing us something about us that we need to be looking at. And that brings us to loving the unlovable. Because I know for so many of us, on two fronts, we have parts of ourselves that we criticize, that we put down, that we're ashamed of, that we're unwilling to look at, the unlovable pieces that exist inside of us. And one of the ways that we most often choose not to look at those things is by projecting them onto other people. And I want to invite us to put those two things together and make the connection between that which we're unwilling to look at ourselves, that which we are unwilling to look at within ourselves, and that which we are most triggered by, and that which we are most angry or frustrated or hurt by in the experience of others. And I want to talk for a moment about my experience of the debates and of much of the political tension that we've been seeing in our world recently. And I've been having a lot of conversations with people about the evocation of hatred, of anger, of these deep strange wishes that are being pulled out of our hearts for our leaders and for people that we see in the world. And anytime you look on the news, the hatred that is being drawn forth is begging us to look at something. And I want us to begin to recognize that whoever we see out there that angers us, that triggers us, that we cannot comprehend how they are behaving that way, that is reflecting something back at us and asking us to look for God, asking us to look for our connection to those other people. I was watching the presidential debate a few weeks ago, as many of us were, and I felt the evocation of frustration and anger and irritation just in the collective mind, if you will, as this event was taking place, as this non-conversation was happening in front of all of us. And I posted on Facebook and I began texting a bunch of people in my life, and I just said, you know what, if you're yelling at the screen right now, please stop and pray. And I may have shared this last time we talked, but I think this is a really important point, is that if we are getting wrapped up and participating in the elevation of separation by arguing and creating more anger and more frustrated energy, then we are simply participating in the projection and the creation of more separation, of more distortion, and that our job as consistently efforting conscious beings who practice the science of mind, which I know that we are, is to stop ourselves from engaging in the reaction and allowing these things to be drawn forth from us and say, you know what, if this is happening, it's because this thing exists in me, and I need to look for where this exists within myself, and I need to take the time to slow myself, to pause myself, to return to my sense of connection and awareness and begin to look for God in this moment, and to be the one who sees what is and is unwilling to be moved by the distortion, and hold a sense of peace, hold a sense of oneness, hold a sense of knowingness that God is what's happening here. And I beg us, I urge us, especially in these moments, in this time, in this place, to begin to lean into our awareness that God is all there is, and that there is an underlying beingness, love, consciousness, life force, energy, whatever you want to call it, that connects us as individuals to the planet, to life, to God. Wherever you can find that connection, begin to cultivate it with everything that you have, as if it is the most important task you can engage in. To begin to build the muscle in mind that can see God. To begin to return to our affirmation, return to our spiritual mind treatment, return to meditation, return to prayer, return to our deep, ever unanswerable question: how is this God? How is this God? How is that person God? How is this moment in time God? How is this? How is this? God itself revealing itself to me through us right now. It may be an unanswerable question, but the simple asking of it, instead of reacting, instead of engaging in hatred and fear, in whatever the other emotions that have been stirred up in you in the last number of months, instead of engaging in those reactions, begin to build and cultivate the muscle of response, the mental awareness, the willingness to look for God, to look for love, to look for evolution, to look for the principles of life that we so deeply declare are the truth, to begin to look for them underneath everything. Ernest Holmes often used this term, saying that back of all creation, there is a presence, there is a source, there is a force, there is a law. But this idea that he uses, and it's kind of this old 1900s language, but this idea that back of all things, there is something else holding all of it. I like to say that below all things, or underneath all things, or down inside of all things, there is something that weaves it all together, that holds it all, that exists within it all. And the process of creation, the process of growth, the process of transformation is not always easy. It's not always pretty. It's not always fun. And I truly believe that we are currently moving together through a collective moment of transformation, of transmutation, of breakdown and rebirth, that we are together as God in process, moving towards a world that truly works. And I believe that there's a great shaking and stirring taking place, so that all that no longer serves, all that is within us, that has been projecting the world that we have, that has continued to appear to be not working, we have to shake all that stuff to the surface so that we can see it, so that we can recognize what it is, and then banish it, break it down, take it apart, find new places for it, whatever we have to do with it. But it has to come up right into our faces so that we can see clearly what it is that needs to be taken care of, where our attention is needed, where our prayer is needed, where our connections need to be made, and where the bridges need to be built, so that we can truly build a structure in mind, a pattern in the world that is stable, that supports all of life and everyone living their highest and best, so that we can actually participate in creating this idea of a world that works, that we in CSL speak to so often. And so this week, as you move out into the world, I just want to ask you to begin to ask yourself, what is it going to take for me to get out of the turbulence and the troubled water in order to at least stand outside of the circumstance in mind a little bit, to begin to see above it, to look for the places where we can build the bridge, to find the place where you and I are connected, where each one of us and everyone out there are one. Begin to look for the places where you can be the connection. Begin to look for the connections in the world. Start to put the pieces together. Start to connect the dots. Start to look for all of the ways that the one thing, that our connection, that God, that evolution, that change, that whatever is being brought up is being reflected around us. Because the more we ask to see it, the more that we will. The more that we choose to look for it, the more that it will appear. And so walk in the world this week as if everything is connected. Walk in the world this week as if you are looking for the connection between you and the other in every face that shows up in front of you. Walk in the world this week and look for the connections. Be the place where the bridging happens. And begin to look for the unlovable places in yourself. And when you see them, and when you see them in the world, begin to ask, how is this God? How is God being revealed in this instance, in this moment, in this feeling, in this reaction, in this person, in this belief? How is this God? How is it all connected? These must be our questions. This must be what we are looking for. We must be willing to not get an answer, but keep asking the question until it becomes what we see. It becomes how we see. And then it becomes what we create. So take a deep breath in again. And if it's comfortable for you, close your eyes. As we together move in mind into a place of remembering that there is only one life. That this life is what we call God. And that this presence, this oneness, this connection, this life force is intimately and intricately interwoven into every interaction and every experience. It is in every choice point. It is in every being. It is the laws that hold all things together, and it is the one who is experiencing all that is unfolding. That indeed the connection exists as our very nature, as the very field of existence in which we live. Let each one of us remember that this one seamless presence is breathing each one of us. It is the life force that breathes our body and beats our hearts and grows the trees and shines the sun and lives and breathes and moves and has its being as each individual life. And each of us is a place where that is happening. Each one of us is a place where the Spirit of the living God is revealing itself. Each one of us is a place where all that is comes into a point of connection and becomes a newness of experience and perspective. And so let us take the connection that we are and walk it in the world. Let each one of us be a bridge where consciousness can find itself, where love can reveal itself. Let each one of us be the connection with another human being. Let each one of us be a perspective that looks for love, that looks for God, that looks for light, that looks for life, looks for evolution, that looks for truth, and is willing to see it when it shows up and reflects itself back to us. So that we can continue to live and breathe and move and have our being in a state of gratitude and celebration for the Spirit of life, knowing that it is moving all things. Because that there is a power for good in this universe that is greater than we are, greater than we are, greater than any one of us, greater than all of us collectively. There is a power for good in this universe that permeates and pervades and moves all things. And so let us surrender to it. Let us allow it to course through us and to be the experience of life that happens as us. Let us be the place where the question, how is this God, is answered and revealed as our very lives. And so for all of this, and so much more, I just stand in the declaration of yes by saying, and so it is, and so it is, and so it is. Thank you, my friends. Happy Sunday. Walk in love.